Welcome to lesson number 30. And this one may be just a little bit longer than some of the last ones because I'm going to spend this whole session on bandsaw setup and calibration. In our classroom here we have three different sizes of bandsaws, which pretty much represents the whole gauntlet of what's available. Starting off with this small 10-inch bench stop unit, 10-inch. That means from here to the blade is approximately 10 inches. Gives me the possibility of doing a piece of wood 10 inches cut deep. One, our largest bandsaw is this 16-inch, again, nominal 16 inches. This is a much bigger unit which we cut a lot of green wood on for various different classes. More powerful, larger capacity. But the one maybe like many of you have is this 14-inch jet bandsaw. This one has been equipped with what's called a riser block, a piece that fits in here to the head that adds an additional 6 inches of height. When you buy it, it can only cut about this deep. By adding this component in here, I now am able to cut something 12 inches deep. This is the one we're going to spend a lot of time on. I'm going to change the blade and we're going to recalibrate it. So I'm going to come back to the little green one for a second and show you one of the tests that you need to perform on your bandsaw when you check it out, maybe every week. I've got a piece of wood here. This edge is square. And I took a pair of dividers and scribed a line here that's parallel with this edge. Now, one of the things that happens to bandsaws a lot is what we call drift. As the blade wears, I'm going to take the miter gauge off. One side tends to get dull faster than the other side. As a result, it tends to want to cut in one direction a little bit more than the other. And we develop what we call drift, which means if I put it against the fence and push it in, it doesn't cut always parallel to the fence. It's a good test that the blade's getting a little dull. It needs to be changed or recalibrated. Recalibrated, and I'll show you that. But the test easiest done is take the fence completely out of the way and cut a line here. Let me get my safety glasses on and show you that cut. So I've scribed the line, I've got my safety glasses, I push the fence away, and what I'm going to do is make a cut down this line about halfway and then stop without moving anything. Waited for the vacuum system to shut off. Now I've not moved anything. I know this edge is straight. I know this line is parallel with it. But if you can see, bring the fence over and lock it down, that piece of wood is not running absolutely straight. What's happened is this blade has created what's called some drift. So what I'm going to do, without moving this piece of wood, I'm going to take a felt marker scribe a line. That is the line you follow to cut straight on this bandsaw with this blade at this setting. And that difference between perfectly vertical and that line is called blade drift. And that's how you test it, just the way I did. Now, two solutions we can do. We could change the blade. It's probably dull on this side over here and cutting much better over here. Or on many bandsaws, not this particular model, I can adjust the angle on the fence to track that. And then I can use the fence again because I can track along with that line. This little bandsaw doesn't allow me to make this kind of adjustment But many bandsaw fence systems do allow you to be able to move the fence itself to line up with the track. Tracking the blade, important when you want to cut parallel straight lines. I'm going to come back and talk more about this bandsaw in a few minutes about how it differs from the other models we have. But I'm going to go right to the 14-inch on the other end, and we're going to take it apart, and we are going to take the blade off, and we're going to change the blade and go through the whole calibration process, step by step. So let's step down to the end and start that process of changing the blade and calibrating the saw. Fine. Here we are at the 14-inch bandsaw, and I'm going to take the tray off so that when we change the blade and adjust the guides, A, it's easier for you to see, and B, it's easier for me to do. So the first thing to take it off, this guide comes out. The steel tray is held together with a pin right here. Many times it takes pliers to loosen that pin, and it needs to be taken out. This plate is held on in a trunnion here with two locking screws, which I am going to take out completely. I'm careful not to drop them. And now this will lift off. I'm going to pick it up, slide the blade through this slot, and set the whole tray away. Sorry I had to block your view a little bit to get it through this slot. So this is out of the way. And as you can see, tremendous amount of dust accumulation here that sometimes doesn't get cleaned up very well with vacuum cleaners and stuff. It just gets wedged underneath here and we can't get to it sometimes. This has a different set of guides on it than the other ones. These are called Carter guides, and these are roller bearings that ride on either side of the blade, and there's a third roller bearing that rides on the back edge of the blade. And so what we're going to do is to get them completely out of the way, get these, the bottom guides, completely out of the way. I know for a fact that these are Imperial Allen set screws because I went ahead and checked it out in the beginning ahead of time. So I'm going to loosen here, and this pulls back. And I can loosen here. And these will slide outward. And so what I've done is completely cleared these away from the blade, and I'm going to do the same thing in the bottom. One's loose, the other's loose. What I now can do is slide these two to the side also. And now what we're going to do is open the bottom. One of the things we have to do before we touch anything, be sure that we're power disconnected, which we are. And now we have access to the whole saw, and this blade is under tension. So the first thing we're going to do is take the tension off. On the top of the bandsaws in almost all models, there's a knob. By turning it counterclockwise, this wheel here is lowered. And as it's lowered, the tension comes off the blade. See, it's getting much looser. completely loose. And what I'm going to do is step in front, pop this blade off. I have to take it from inside of here, off of the wheel. Now with the snap. Now, disposing of a blade like this is always a problem. What I'm going to do is I'm going to put my foot on the bottom of this. I'm going to grab it with my fingers inside like this. Roll it up. And that's nice and safe to dispose of. Put a tie around it if you like. And the new blade, because this has a riser on it, I know what the blade length is. We've written it here, 105 inches. And we bought a blade that is appropriate for that. And we're going to uncoil it. I can use one of these to tie up the other one when I throw it away. Now, uncoiling these things, people cut themselves a lot because they do it carefully like that. Here's the safer way. Pitch it. It may land with the teeth up or the teeth down, but the point of it is it's not going to damage them near as much as it would cut you up. So when I look at this blade, I have to decide which ways to go on. The teeth I can see here are aimed downward, so I want to put it on in this direction here so the teeth cuts going this particular direction. So this is the orientation that blade's going to go on. But before I put it on, I'm going to spend a couple minutes cleaning up all this sawdust and getting all this stuff out of here first. So I'm going to turn on the dust collection for a second and do a little bit of vacuuming here. Teeth down. Now I'm looking at these wheels. These tires, we call them tires, are pretty dirty. And that's sawdust that has been drugged around and embedded in these rubber tires through the process of just using the bandsaw. When we look at the 16-inch over here, you'll find it's much worse because the green wood dust impacts a lot faster and a lot harder. So I'm going to take a brass brush. I'm going to clean these up as much as I can. Same thing on the one in the bottom. Brass rather than steel. Now there's still marks on here, but the majority of the sawdust is off. Steel will cut into the rubber. We don't want to do that. It's only been all the way around. So now I'm going to put the blade on. It's the same process I did a second ago when I took the other one off. Okay, there in the slot. Around the lower wheel. Roughly in the center, roughly in the center. And I have just enough tension on here that it's not going to fly off the wheel, and I'm turning this by hand. And what I'm looking at is whether this is tracking in the center of the wheel. And right now it's tracking a little bit to the back. On the back of most bandsaws, right here on the back, there's another knob. When I tighten it or loosen it, I'm going to change the angle on this wheel. And if I tighten it, it's going to move it more towards the back. And if I loosen it, it's going to allow this to track more towards the front. A little tension. Now, I'm going to check the tracking by turning the wheel by hand to see where the blade rides on the wheel. This is slightly crowned. The point of it is that by adjusting the angle of the wheel, I can cause the blade to run farther forward or farther to the rear. And by turning it by hand, it looks like it's staying right in the middle. So the knob in the center, right back behind my finger here on the back side, if I crank it in and out, it tilts the wheel one way or the other. And by adjusting that, I could change where this tracks. Right now it's looking pretty good, so I'm just going to lock it right in place. Now the next thing I need to do is to tension the blade. The thinner the blade, the more tension I need on it in order for it to cut straight. And I'm going to come over here where it's not touching anything other than these two wheels, and I'm going to pluck it. I hear a fairly low pitch sound, and I'm adjusting this to my ear. And granted, this is something that you'll have to figure out on your own. But I don't want it to deflect more than about 1/4 of an inch with light finger pressure. I want to hear a musical tone. And I pluck it there rather than over here. There's too many things it's running into and it kind of kills the sound. But over on this side, where it's only touching on the two wheels, it's like a banjo string. That's pretty good. So we have it tracking, we have it tensioned, and now it's about adjusting these guides, the top one and the bottom one. You can see why I took the tray off now, so I can get to the guides here on the bottom much more easily. So the first thing I need to do is to position them forward and backwards so that when they're closed in, they touch behind the gullet of the tooth. If it touches the tooth itself, it's going to dull the teeth. These teeth are set like this, one to the left, one to the right. And if the wheel touches there, it's going to push those teeth and it's going to damage things. So I have to set it back far enough. And that means this mechanism here has to be moved backward. So take my Allen wrench here. Oh, not the right one. Let's see what size we need. Okay. So I'm loosening this mechanism. You see it slides forward and backwards. And I'm going to adjust it till the front of these rollers is behind the gullet of the teeth, which is right about there on the bottom. And almost impossible to see if the tray is on. And I'm going to do the same thing up here. This one looks like it could come forward just a bit and lock in. Now, these two rollers, we want to pinch on this blade, but we don't want to touch it directly. We want it to be just very slightly near it, in which case I'm going to tighten this roller. And tighten this one. And I'm going to spin the wheel to see how that's working. Now I'm going to do the same thing up on top. Now, I could push that way over like that and bend this out of position. So I don't want to do that. I want to allow this thing to find its own best position. Right there. Tighten. Tighten. Now, that's pulling too much. I want to take a little pressure off. Oh, that's great. So, we got the blade on. We've got the calibration set here. There is one last roller on the top, which needs to be brought forward so it just barely touches the back edge of this. Loosen it. Pull it forward. And what happens is when I'm making a cut, the blade gets pushed back, and now it's stopped by this back roller. Okay, next thing to do is put the top back on it again and adjust the squareness of the tray. Now this is a little difficult. You see we have two places here that these have to set. These drop into those slots. The blade goes through the slot here. Like so. Into the center. Rotate 90 degrees. And drop it right onto the trunnion. Line up these two screws. That back one's done. The front one is not. As soon as I get these in place, I'll tighten the screws, and we will have locked this down. Now you see this tilts. We're going to fix that next, but I'm going to lock it in place with the two knobs that came off. Loosely tighten it. Now, I want to make sure this is square, and so what I have is something I can set here, either plane. And I'm looking to see that that's exactly at 90 degrees. If it is not, this stop back here can be adjusted up and down. And that's 90 degrees, that's right where we want it to be. So now I'm going to tighten these two. We're going to put the insert back in place again. And by the way, you can make these out of wood. There's little notches that cause this to line up. I tend to put the slot to the rear. Press this down in. And one of the last things we do, a little bit of paste wax. Give us a nice surface to work on here. A little wax on, a little wax off. And that saw is set and ready to go. Now we're going to edit the tape a little bit here to reduce some of the time we spent on several of these steps, but it does take a little bit of fiddling around to get this blade just exactly right. There are accessories that you can buy for your bandsaw that expands the side of the table and changes the kind of fence that you have and so on. But outside of that, all these are the same. I want to take you to the next bandsaw and show you how these guides here on this one differ on the 16-inch. So we're going to pan right over here. And if you look carefully, let me just raise this so it's easier to see. The guides on this one are round discs, which are adjusted like this. There's a locking nut. I can tighten that down to until it's almost touching, and then to relock it. I can do the same thing on the other side. That looks pretty good. And there is a roller right here in the back that's pushed up against the back edge of the blade. And believe it or not, down below, there's another set just like that. On the third one, you'll see very similar to the first one. It has little roller adjustments. It can be brought in and out. Back roller to control the back edge of the blade. Exactly the same. I have in my hand the set from a different kind of a bandsaw. This is one I have at home. Instead of using rollers or pads, I have some ceramic blocks here. One side of the blade, other side of the blade, and this goes in and out to be the back side of the blade. And this is ceramic. Different set of guides, different brand of saw, but the purpose is exactly the same. So the guides stay behind the gullet of the tooth, and we showed you how to track that. We can go over to this one right now and make another cut on that same piece of wood, and I will guarantee you that if we did that, that cut would be perfectly straight and parallel to the axis of the bandsaw itself. So I hope this helped a little bit in giving you some ideas about the setup of your bandsaws. It's important to keep it tuned up properly. Do that drift test with your bandsaw from time to time. The moment it doesn't cut square, you know that your blade is beginning to wear. Pushing harder isn't the solution. Pushing straight with a good guide, tightly adjusted blades is the guide. Get it set up. One of the things I forgot to mention earlier, when we had this blade off, it would be really useful to know if these rollers really work and if they actually turn. Sometimes the bearings inside go bad and they need to be replaced. If these do not roll free, then we're going to braid the back of the blade and reduce the quality of our cuts. The other thing I always have to mention with bandsaws is the safety concern that you have to have. This device was originally designed and built to cut meat, and that's pretty close. The tendency for many people who make errors with their bandsaw is to push right here in front of the blade, and that is absolutely avoidable under all circumstances. I'm pushing here and it's cutting fine. I hit maybe a pocket in the wood where it's softer, and all of a sudden my fingers go right into it. Always have a push block. Never have a finger in front of the blade. Always push from the side, or if we need pressure in the front, use a push block. Doesn't matter how safe the cut seems to be, always use a push block. Thanks for watching.